you hear me okay back there? All right. My voice is a little raspy, so I'll have to keep drinking some water. And make sure everybody can see up here, because we're going to talk about several different things. And I hope by the time we're done here, we all are comfortable enough with each other to be able to ask questions, comment, and hopefully we have a good conversation here. I'm going to get busy here, and I just wanted to mostly get my computer here going. There we go. Wanted to talk about or ask you a question here right after I play this video, but to make sure that we get on the same page before we move forward with a couple things. And I think if we could get on the same page with some understanding that we can have a good meeting here and that we can all hopefully know what we can do in the future for our state and for our freedom. So, but before we do that, I'm going to play this video. Idaho, to me, represents the best of what America was. Idaho was a conservative state with traditional family values, full of people of faith who carried guns, loved the Constitution, helped each other, and built businesses by the sweat of their own brow. Idaho is sliding down the path and ceasing to be the Idaho that we love. I don't want that to happen. And so I'm announcing now that I will be running as governor for the great state of Idaho. As governor, I will be implementing a plan and a platform to keep Idaho, Idaho. The Keep Idaho, Idaho plan will improve life, bring prosperity, empower and protect families, and secure the opportunity for happiness to every person living within the beautiful state of Idaho. I know how to win. My record and history demonstrates that I am willing to fight to the very end. Now it's your choice. May God bless the people of Idaho. May we live up to these blessings. May we keep Idaho a bastion of freedom and prosperity for years to come. May we be an example to the world of how to be free, of how to act, how to treat each other. And together, all of us together, may we keep Idaho, Idaho. Thank you, my friends. Thank you. All right, do we have a light switch that can turn the lights on, at least maybe half of these? Maybe I'm going to be using this projector pretty good, and I want to make sure everybody can see it. There we go, that'll be just right, I think. I believe so. All right, I'm going to ask you a question here. What is freedom? Yeah, that's much better. Thank you, that's perfect. What is freedom? And this is, I want your feedback. I want you to let me know. I have to admit that until the things that happened to my family and I hadn't really thought about it. Of course, freedom to me I felt it. It was important. We sang about it. We talk about it. I believe that we sent our servicemen and women to defend it, but I had never really defined it before. And so I want to ask you, what is it? Because I went through that. I went through it, and I believe I have a definition for you, but I want to hear yours. Go ahead.
Absence of tyranny.
Absence of tyranny. Okay, I'd agree with that. What else? Limited government. Can you see over there enough? You sure? Because we can move you over here. Okay, limited government. Okay, right here.
Ability to choose, make your own decisions without interference and live your life in accordance with, I would say, God's laws.
Okay, yes, the ability to choose, live your life without interference according to God's laws. Okay, I like that definition. That's good. Who else? Right here.
Just the ability to exercise our God-given rights without any encumbrance from a government bureaucracy.
Okay, I like that. Is everybody here? Can you hear what's being said back there, way in the back? Okay, what else? Any, right here?
Freedom is a pursuit. It's the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness.
Okay, those are some of the words written in the Declaration of Independence. Yeah. Okay, well, I agree. I haven't heard anything that I disagree with. I defined this as freedom as the ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights.
Amen.
Okay? And but let's apply it. Let's apply this definition. Again, the ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon another person's rights. So let's talk about, let's say, freedom of worship. So to be able to worship whatever you want, as long as you're not infringing upon someone else's rights. In one of the meetings I had, I said, well, I could worship a yellow dog if I want. And the guy says, well, you might get fleas. And I'm not saying it's a good idea to worship a yellow dog. That's not, don't get me wrong. But I'm saying in this country, in this land, we believe that we should be able to worship whatever we want as long as we're not infringing upon our neighbor's rights. And that's freedom. And we need to afford our neighbors that same right. So freedom to own private property. So how would we define that? The ability to do whatever you want on your property as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights, right? Are we losing that freedom? Yes. We are. We've pretty much lost that, which we'll talk about private property here in a little bit. Freedom to publish your thoughts. What's that called in the Bill of Rights?
Freedom of speech.
Freedom of the press. That's right. To be able to publish your thoughts. So the freedom to speak out, right, would be freedom of speech, and be able to say whatever you want as long as you're not infringing upon your neighbor's rights. To be able to publish your thoughts. To be able to say what you want to say. We're seeing a culture where that's being canceled, right? Where you can't say what you want, or you lose your job, or you I could go on and on.
Lose your bank account.
Lose your bank account. Yeah, exactly. Lose everything that you've built. Freedom to travel. You need to travel wherever you want to without infringing upon someone else's rights. This one I particularly like. I don't know why, but being in business and doing different things. But the freedom to trade with each other. To be able to trade whatever you want with each other, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Where you have a willing buyer and a willing seller. And it's two consenting individuals saying, I want that for this, and you could trade. And there's really no room for a government to be able to try to stop that or to profit off every transaction. So, freedom to have and raise children. There's certainly an attack on that right now. Freedom to choose where you want to live. So you can live wherever you want to live, as long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. So I can't decide I'm going to live in your backyard, right? Because there's a problem there. Like, I can't say, well, I'm going to live wherever I want. It's going to be in your backyard, because I'm infringing upon your rights at that point. But I should be able to choose what town I want to live in, what area I want to live in, as long as it's within the realm of not infringing upon somebody else's rights. And so, can we all at least somewhat agree with that definition of freedom?
Yes.
Okay? And as we think about this, and as we go about our lives, hopefully from now on, this will define things for you. So, whatever you're doing, you say, look, this is the definition of freedom. The ability to do whatever you want as long as you are not infringing upon somebody else's rights. I got to get my computer working here a little better. Hang on. It's not giving me. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I'm going to go down through and I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. I'm here wanting to gain your confidence so you'll vote for me and support me as a governor. So to do that, welcome. To do that, I want you to understand who I am a little bit about my background, how I ended up in Idaho, because we've been here for 7 years. I grew up on a ranch in southern Nevada, the Bundy Ranch. Here's a picture of my mother and father, Clive and Carol Bundy, and I'm grateful to be able to have been raised by honorable people who love the Lord and who taught me right from wrong and taught me how to work and didn't let me get away with things if I was wrong. And it's a privilege to be raised by a mother and a father who cared and who would teach you. And I certainly have that. This is a picture of the ranch. You see it's a pretty dry, arid place. There's not a lot of vegetation there, but it is beautiful in its own right. This is a steer that's on the hill there, and you can't see completely. It's not really clear, but you can see the vegetation and stuff there. I mean, it's the desert, and sometimes these Joshua trees will get pears on them, and they'll every year typically, and the cattle will eat that. But it takes about 100 acres of this desert ground to be able to produce enough food for one cow. And so, but my dad runs several hundred head of cattle on this land, and my family's been in that area since 1877, so now almost 150 years. And they went in there at a time when no one else wanted it. No one else wanted it. In fact, the people that came in before them were only there for a few months. I think they were there for, 9 months or so. They went back to Brigham Young in Salt Lake, because he's the one that sent them down there. And they said that the place was uninhabitable, that it was too dry and too arid, and no one could ever live there. And so we always tease that Brigham Young went and he said, well, I'm going to find the most obstinate, hard-headed, stubborn people I can find and send them down there. And he found my family. And my family's been down there ever since. And one of the things that's unique about this land, or at least makes it possible to survive on, is there's springs. There's just small little artesian springs. They're very small, and they're scattered around the mountains, the foothills of the mountains. And my ancestors went in there and captured those waters and began to divert them so they can water the cattle. And now this watering system is over 30 square miles over this area. It's all maintained by my dad. He doesn't ask for the government's money. He doesn't ask for the government to assist him in that. But it makes it so that we can run cattle on the desert. There's a picture of my dad in the background and a bull. And you can see there's some hair on the bull's horn, so he's probably just got done hooking the horse, or maybe one of the other cattle. But this is my little brother. This is a scene that I grew up with. It was pretty familiar to me, very familiar. Here's my little sister getting off the bus. She's been met with 4 dogs and a calf. And that calf was actually, her mother was hit on the highway, and my dad did an emergency C-section and saved the calf and bottle fed the calf until it was a really nice, actually ended up being a nice bull. When I was about 15, my dad said the ranch wasn't big enough for the both of us. And he wasn't doing that to be mean or, saying that we were having, but he was just explaining that at some point the ranch, I was going to have to leave the ranch, and the ranch wasn't going to be able to produce enough for more than a couple families. And I was in the middle of the mix, so he was telling me that most likely I was going to have to go and find a living another way. And so when I was 19, I went and served a mission for 2 years in Minnesota, and that was a completely different experience for me, leaving the ranch. And then, it's 120 plus degrees in the summer down there, and then go to Minnesota. And I wasn't in that specific area, but one of the years I was there, it was 70 below in Pilot, Minnesota. And so, and then also I was able to take 2 years and just kind of figure out who I was. I was able to decide that I wanted to serve the Lord, not just myself, that I wanted to be able to, you know, everything that I did, I wanted to do because it was the right thing and what the Lord wanted me to do. And I'm grateful for this time. I consider this time a sacred couple of years for me. And it also gave me some refinement that I needed. You know, growing up on the ranch, I wasn't full of refinement, and this gave me that opportunity to be able to get a little taste of that. After I came home from Minnesota, I went to Southern Utah University, and I started a little business in Cedar City, Utah as well. I thought it would put me through college, and the business ended up taking over, and I mostly, I ended up just mostly running my business when I was there. And I was there the whole time in Cedar City and kept wondering, well, why am I here? I'd be better if I moved somewhere else, move my business somewhere. And I was there for several years and finally realized that I was there waiting for my wife. And she showed up, and we got married pretty quick. And then we moved to Arizona. I moved my business down to Arizona, and we started life down there. We have 6 children now, 3 boys, 3 girls. My oldest daughter is married, and she lives in Moscow, Idaho. They're going to school up there. And my youngest is running around here. He's right there in that jacket, that 7-year-old with the, looks like we haven't combed his hair in about 3 or 4 days, which is about the truth. And we ended up in Arizona. Well, in Arizona, I started a fleet maintenance business where I was managing and maintaining commercial trucks. And I ended up building one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona, where I employed hundreds of people. I've hired and fired hundreds of people. I've dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, and had teams building and developing business procedures that ended up being some of the leading procedures in the industry. And when I was about 17 years into my business, I began to be I was needing some software that would help me to be able to do all the processes in the business. And I couldn't find any. We were using financial software. We're using a maintenance tracking software, and I was had a service order software, and we were printing off paper. And anyway, it was quite a process that we were having to follow because we didn't have just one software that could do it all, and there just wasn't anything out there. And so my dad taught me that if there wasn't something out there, or if you didn't have a job, then you make it. And we live in the United States of America. That's what we can do. And so I put together a team, and we began to develop a software, and it took us several years. And it ended up being, and is now, one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. We've now since sold it to, sold it all over North America to other shops. And it's become one of the leading fleet maintenance shop management software, and has really impacted how the maintenance industry operates. And so why do I tell you that? Because I want you to know that I have more background than just the ranch. Although I'm very grateful for the blessings I have of being able to be raised on the ranch. But I had to leave, put my big boy pants on, and go make a living another way. And I was able to do that, and it put me down a path where I have hired and fired hundreds of people, dealt with millions of dollars of budgets, built multiple million-dollar companies, and had to go down those processes. I'm not going to get too much into what happened to my family, because about this time where all this stuff was happening, all of a sudden, I guess it wasn't all of a sudden, but the federal government ultimately came down upon my father's ranch and family, and threatened to take their ranch away. And my father had a problem with that. And just to kind of cast it a little bit, Harry Reid had made some deal with a Chinese corporation where they were going to build the largest solar farm in the world, actually. And it was 70 miles from our ranch. And I guess the solar farms are kind of hard on the wildlife. And so the environmentalists, extreme environmentalists, got involved and said, well, we want you to take all the wildlife and put them in a mitigation area, especially the desert tortoise. Well, they decided that mitigation area was going to be the Bundy Ranch, and they wanted to drive, all the cattle off of it and use the Bundy Ranch as a mitigation area. Well, my dad was like, no, we have rights to this. We have deeds. We have all those water rights are all deeded, and they're called livestock watering rights. And with them comes the grazing rights, because there was so many cattle that could be grazed around that water, and that's how the deeds are written up. And so my dad was, not going to give up his heritage and his livelihood, and he was not going to stop ranching. And so there ended up being a huge dispute that went on for about 20 years, legal, back and forth, and ultimately my dad said no, and then in 2014 they decided that they would send a 213 federal army really after my family, and they began to destroy the water infrastructure. They began to shoot the cattle from helicopters and put them in mass graves. They began to just destroy all our, corrals, and did it while they were guarding and blocking anybody from going up into the ranch. And you might remember that happened in 2014. It's crazy that it's been that long ago, but it made national news. And part of the reason why it did is because, I'll show you here, is because we began to film this or video what was going on, and ultimately people from all around the country came and decided to stand with my family.
I remember that.
And and there was thousands of people ultimately that came, and they gave these federal agents an ultimatum, and that was just to leave. And they decided to take it because the American people were so resolved in saying, you are not going to destroy this family's property, livelihood, and the abuses that they were pushing on us was enough that the American people just said no. And so here's a picture. I want to show you this. It's
armored vehicles there.
What's that?
They had armored vehicles there, didn't they?
Oh yeah, they had MRAMs, helicopters. It was like a scene out of the Hollywood movie Red Dawn. That's what it looked like when at our ranch. And ultimately, the American people came, and this is a picture. And if you look right here, that's I-15, and they're driving up to it, and there's a full line of vehicles all the way up, going up to the freeway. And this vehicle's about a third of the way through. There was 107 federal vehicles that ended up leaving that day, and they left. They left the area, and we went back to ranching. And shortly after that, I moved to Emmett, Idaho. Now this is a picture in 2021, but we moved to Emmett, Idaho in 2015, so 7 years ago. And I wanted to come to Idaho because I had seen what had happened, and I felt like I needed to get my family among a people that understood liberty and would, you know, stand for it. I could see what was going to happen in this country because of what happened to my family. I saw the force, I saw what was happening, I saw the political side of things, and I could see that what was going to happen, that what happened to my family was going to happen to all of us. And I wanted to make sure that I was in a place that I could, you know, that I could be around people that would understand freedom and possibly even stand. Now, what is that? What did happen to my family? I just want to boil it down because I want you to see that the very same thing that happened to my family is happening to all of us now. And ultimately, what happened to my family was our rights were being taken, were being claimed by the government or a government as a privilege. And therefore they were saying, well, you don't have a right to run your cattle and to do all these things you've been doing for 150 years. It's just a privilege, and we're going to take that privilege away from you because it's ours. Well, let's apply that to what's happening to all of us here. I mean, let's just talk about our bodies, right? We just went through a situation, and we're still in the middle of it, where the government's saying that, you know, the right to control your body is not your right, it's ours, and it's a privilege we give you. You know, the right to own own and control property is not your right, it's our right, and it's a privilege that we give you. And so this is something that we need to be aware of that is happening, that these rights that God gave us, the right to control our body, to make decisions, to control property, to be able to make decisions for ourselves. We have wicked men and women, typically in government, that are trying to say that that is not a right, that it's a privilege. And we have to make sure that we understand that. Yeah.
To put it in a little bit more closer to home perspective, my family's owned a farm here in Parma for 250 years. They're trying to take our land, actively, as I speak. The FBI has been on our property.
So, property is one of the things that they have attacked very, very strongly. They have, and it is, very much comes down to the effort to make your property common, which is a communist plan. In fact, Karl Marx says that communism can be summed up into one sentence: the abolition of private property. And so let's.
They're already selling that propaganda.
What's that?
They're already selling that propaganda. You'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah, you'll own nothing and be happy. That's right.
So what a bunch of bogus.
Yeah, it's completely contrary to the way that our founders set up this country, and we know that you cannot. I mean, imagine not having a place, your home, that you could go to and be comfortable. Imagine that belonging to somebody else, and it doesn't matter. A government official can come in at any time they want. They can tell you what they can do with it. We just cannot go that way. So let's talk about Idaho a little bit, because I want to specifically get into Idaho, because Idaho is in a battle for its conservative soul. And a lot of the reason why is because of this man and his buddies. And I want to I'm going to go down through some of these things and hopefully show you what is happening in Idaho and help you get more aware of, and so that we can fight against it. Because Idaho was the first state in the United States to have people arrested for attending church. I don't know if you remember. Always trust in chariots and others trust in horses. This is the pastor in Moscow, Idaho. Yeah. Idaho was also the first state to arrest a mother for going to the park with her children. Right, so we felt that we're protected. We're in Idaho. This doesn't happen in Idaho, but But Idaho is the first state to have people arrested for going to church. The first state to arrest a mother for taking her kids to the park. One of the first states to rate a business for not shutting down. In fact, it was in Ketchum, Idaho. And why? So we have to ask, why are the police acting like this in Idaho? And ultimately, it comes down to, well, let me show you. This guy here actually works for Idaho State Police, and he tells us. I'm going to play this video. He tells us right at the beginning what he's doing. So if you listen, he'll tell you what he's doing. Now he's undercover, and he's going into this Harbor Brewing Company, and he's issuing him a citation, and he tells them why.
Real quick, this is from the state.
Would you say that again, sir? Hand him that letter back.
Now,
I would like to hear him identify himself again.
I'm Jake Schwecken with the Idaho State Police. I'm just delivering this letter in response to you guys opening it, in contrast to the stay-at-home order.
Did you hear that? So I am issuing this letter in contrast to you opening to the stay-at-home order. So he's telling him that the reason why he's doing it is because there's a stay-at-home order. They're not supposed to open their business, and they decided that they were going to open their business. And then a few days later, Idaho State Police raided this business and began prosecuting the owners. And why? Because of this man's orders. Because he ordered it. Now, we might say that he did it for the health and safety of the people of Idaho, right? He did it because he wanted to keep us safe. No? Well, you gotta just give him a chance.
It was only one the power.
Okay, so I'm gonna go through this, and we're gonna answer. I'm gonna show you some evidence, and then you can answer for yourself whether you think he did it for the health and safety of Idahoans. Okay? Because who remembers when Governor Little issued his first emergency order? March 2020, right? It was March 13th. March 13th, okay? Now, interesting enough, on March 13th, President Trump announced that he was releasing $50 billion to states that were in emergency status. Okay? On the very same day that they issued our stay-at-home order. Now, maybe we were in emergency status, right? Maybe we were in emergency, but the problem with that is on the governor's own website, so March 13th, he says there's only one confirmed COVID case. So he puts the whole state of 1.8 million people in emergency status when we have one confirmed COVID case. Okay? And it happens to be the same day that President Trump says, if the state is in emergency status, you can receive part of this $50 billion. Okay? Now, who remembers when Governor Little put us in extreme state of emergency? So it was a few days later on March 25th. Okay, now interesting enough, so he put us in the state of Idaho in extreme state status on March 25th. Now interesting enough, on March 25th, President Trump and Nancy Pelosi announced a $2 trillion federal stimulus deal for states that were in extreme emergency status. Idaho had 136 unconfirmed cases. Again, a state of 1.8 million people, and he puts us in a state of extreme state of emergency, extreme. And we have 136 unconfirmed cases.
Mr. Bundy?
Yes.
I was working at Walmart at the time, and when he came out with his statement, it created a panic.
Yeah.
Stores was panic.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extreme state of emergency, right? I mean, we've got 136 unconfirmed cases. So, and it just happens to be, in order to get part of this $2 trillion, right, you have to be in extreme emergency status. So, now, let's let's look, because Governor Little starts to tell us in his own orders what he's doing. He starts to explain to us in his own emergency orders what he's doing. Right here he says, in securing millions of dollars in funds, and he goes down through, whereas I, there was a first case of COVID, and so on. And then remember this section right here, 46601. Remember that? That's the code or the statute that he says he used to give him authority to do what he's doing. Here in this letter to President Trump, he thanks him for $1.2 billion, and he's excited that the federal government is going to give him more money. Then in this order right here, this is really telling. This is the Governor Little's Executive Order 2020-07, and it's establishing a process to evaluate and implement federal coronavirus funding. And he says, whereas I issued a proclamation on March 13, 2020, declaring a state of emergency in the state of Idaho. Whereas I issued a proclamation on March 25th, 2020, declaring a state of extreme emergency in the state of Idaho, pursuant to Chapter 6, Title 46. That's that same code that I was just telling you about. Then he says, whereas Congress passed and President Trump has signed 3 legislative packages that provide state funding in response to COVID-19, and whereas I anticipate additional congressional action on federal relief packages to states regarding COVID-19. So they're giving us all this money, and they're going to give us more money, and therefore this order is how we're going to handle this money. Okay, now next page says, now therefore, I, Brad Little, Governor of the state of Idaho, do hereby order the creation of a COVID-19 Financial Advisory Committee comprised of members appointed by and serving at the pleasure of the governor.
What a rip.
So, yeah, so he's going to put this committee together that he appoints, and that they're going to serve him at his pleasure. And
He even brought in like Governor Kempthorne and a bunch of old people to be his little council. They weren't even elected anymore.
yeah, it doesn't. He can appoint whoever he wants, right? He's the governor. He's put this, and he's getting all this money, and he's gonna appoint whoever he wants, and he's gonna, it's him and his buddies, and they serve him at his pleasure, and they got all this money. And then he says, this is the final page, for the coronavirus relief funds and other funds to be administered by the office of the governor. So then they're going to administer the funds. Now, thank goodness it's not a whole lot of money, right? I mean, it's only $18 billion. $18 billion. Over
And then
2 times the
you
annual
have
state
a
budget.
little surplus that we have. Why don't we have 19, and why don't we have $10 billion still in our account?
Well, I've been pretty vocal about this being a fake surplus, because how can you take $18 billion from the federal government and then say you have a $1.5 billion surplus?
Amen.
So anyhow, but he says he's going to spend this money out of the office of the governor. He's going to administer these funds by the office of the governor. How are the state funds supposed to be administered in the state of Idaho?
By the comptroller.
By the legislature. That's correct. The legislature are our representatives, because we are a constitutional republic. We're a representative government. Our legislatures, we send the local people vote. They send a legislature, and together they're supposed to decide how the funds of Idaho are administered. But right here, we have a situation where what has Governor Little done? He's bypassed that, right? He's found his own way to get all these funds, over 2 times the annual state budget, to get all these funds and to bring them to his office, and then him and his buddies that serve at his pleasure, they get to decide how they're going to spend this money.
Horrible.
Where's it all gone?
Horrible.
That's a really good question. I wish I had the answer. I don't have it.
A lot of it was wasted or given to friends.
Yeah, they serve at his pleasure, right? He could line their pocket a little bit. So,
And
but you
this money,
see that.
though, by this money though, we're sold out.
Yeah,
to
we're gonna
the
talk about
federal
that. She's ahead of the game right now, I'm telling you. She either understands or she's been in my presentation quite a bit of time. I know you haven't. So yeah, but do you see a problem with this? Right? Why do we have our representatives? Why is the money supposed to be spent through the legislature? So that a small group of people or one person doesn't get to use it on their own how they want to. So that it doesn't become corrupted, wasted. So it doesn't line the pockets of somebody's friends, right? So it's used for the purpose of the people's benefit, right? That is why the legislature is supposed to administer the funds of the state of Idaho, not the office of the governor and a few of his buddies that serve at his pleasure.
Same thing that happened in New Orleans and Louisiana after the hurricane.
Yeah.
And all that money disappeared.
I'm not even familiar with that, but I'm not.
Disaster relief.
So now, if that was all I had to tell you and show you, then I would be like, that's not good, we got to get it fixed. But I'm going to show you some other things that really might make you mad. So remember I told you about that code, that statute, 46601, Title 46, Chapter 6. This is the authority that he used to put the state in emergency status. Now if you look here, Title 46, Militia and Military Affairs, Chapter 6, Martial Law and Active Duty, 46601, authority of the governor. So, did he put us in martial law? He absolutely did. Now, if you go down here, look what he did. It says, during a period of state of extreme emergency, the governor shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and the right to exercise within the area, basically the state, all policing powers vested in the state.
Wasn't there a stipulation in there that the legislators could take it back after 90 days?
Yep, see, she's ahead of me.
But only 20 of them showed up at the Capitol.
Okay, yeah, you're right. But we're going to talk about that. But let's focus. What just happened right here? What did the governor just do? He just took he says, all the shall have complete authority over all agencies of the state government, including all separate boards and commissions, and all policing power vested in the state. What do we call that?
Heil Hitler.
Heil Hitler. Yeah. What do we call so let's get rid of all the hyperboles, right? Let's get rid of all the hyperboles. What by definition is this called?
Dictatorship?
Dictatorship. Right? A dictatorship. And it is tyranny. In fact, I believe it was James Madison said that when all the powers of government are put into one body, that is the definition of tyranny. And so that's what he did. And so he took all the money, he took all this money from the federal government and made it so that he spends it. Then he took the powers of the government, all to his control, including the policing powers, all within his control. And that's what he did to us. Now, yes, you're right, because there is a provision. I'm going to talk about what she just talked about, but I want to show you this first. So this is the stay-at-home order, or the self-isolate order, right? It says this order directs all individuals living in the state of Idaho to self-isolate at their place of residence. So he's telling you that you have to stay in your residence. You can't come out without his permission. And then he says, I direct all businesses and government agencies to cease non-essential operations at physical locations in the state of Idaho. So I don't know about you, but if I have a business and I'm using it to, put clothes on my children's back and to feed them and to provide and pay the bills, it's quite essential to me, right?
Unless you're Home Depot or Lowe's or.
Yeah, that's right. Then unless you're some large corporation, I guess somehow they can just continue in business. And he also said prohibiting all non-essential gatherings of any
of any number of individuals. Now, this is why this was going on. This is why you got police arresting a pastor, arrested multiple people for having church in a parking lot outside. Because the governor believes that he can tell you that you can't worship, that you can't assemble and worship. Well, I don't know about you, but if we go to the U.S. Constitution, right? We go to the First Amendment. It says something about that. I just got to get it here. It says something about that, and it's pretty important. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof.
That's right.
Right? It also talks about the right to assemble, bring people together. But let's go to the Idaho Constitution. So, did these officers not take an oath to this? They did. They took an oath. They actually said that they will uphold the Constitution, that they will defend it against foreign and domestic enemies. That's what they took an oath to.
So did Little.
And Little did too. That's right. He did. And now they're actually going and arresting people for having church. The first time that we know of in the United States since at least the Civil War in Idaho. So let's go to the Idaho Constitution, see what it says. If you go to section 4, it says, it's titled Guarantee of Religious Liberty. The exercise and enjoyment of religious faith and worship shall forever be guaranteed, and no person shall be denied any civil or political right, privilege, or capacity on account of his religious opinions. Then you go to the very last section of the Idaho Constitution, and it even makes it more clear. Find it here. It says, this is a new book, so thanks for being patient. It says, oh, that's not it. Apologize. Okay. It is ordained by the state of Idaho that perfect toleration of religious sentiment shall be secured, and no inhabitant of said state, that be Idaho, shall ever be molested in person or property on account of his or her mode of religious worship. I mean, that's beautiful writing, right? And that's in our Constitution. And yet we have these officers arresting people in Idaho for their mode of worship. And again, we could talk about them breaking their oath. We talk about Governor Little, but how in the world did this health order supersede the Constitution, both U.S. and state Constitution? How? Again, it's them claiming that right to worship belongs to the government, not belongs to the individual. So, also look here, ordering the cessation of all non-essential travel. It's the opposite of freedom. The opposite of freedom. All right. I could go into. First of all, we want to be very glad that now we're still not in an emergency, right? Everything's okay, right? We're out of the emergency status, and so we don't have to worry about other stuff anymore. Right? Is that correct? No. In fact, Governor Little, January 7th, 2022, so that was this month, said that a state of emergency described in section 46-1008 Idaho Code exists in the state of Idaho. He wanted to make sure you understood the beginning of this year that the state of emergency still exists in Idaho. Okay? Yeah. So he wants to make sure that, and now we're moving on to 2 years. 2 years we're being held under these executive orders. And it puts the people of Idaho in a precarious situation. Right now, what we're doing right now, assembling right now, according to them, could justify them coming and raiding us. That's where it puts the people of Idaho. Not only that, he suspended parental rights when the state takes a child into custody. He used these emergency orders to do all kinds of terrible things. And he puts the people of Idaho in a precarious situation where basically we have to, we would just have to openly stand against them. And we shouldn't be in that situation. Our laws should protect us. Our systems of government should protect our freedoms and our liberties. And it has been, this has been an effort by, Governor Little and his buddies and many other governors across the country. And we see how Governor Little did the exact same things as other governors have done. And he just followed suit, almost like they were communicating. And that's where it puts us. So now, with that being said, let's talk. Like I want to hear your thoughts. Well, actually, I'll explain because I wanted to touch on what because she mentioned about the legislatures, how they could end this order, and she's exactly right. So the code continues to go on, and it says that the governor, if he uses this emergency authority, he can only use it for 30 days. And it was supposed to be like if there was a real emergency, like an invasion or something, that he could get everybody going in the right direction to protect their rights. But then it says that he can extend it for another 60 days if it was an extreme state of emergency. However, the statute then goes on and says if he doesn't end the emergency, within the time frame that he has allowed, which is 30 or 60 days, then the legislature shall convene on the 90th day. What does shall mean when it's talking about the Constitution or the Code? It's an order from the people. It's saying they shall convene. And why? So that they can take the dictatorship back and bring it back to a republic form of government, a representative government. And all they have to do is convene and pass a joint resolution in the Senate and the House, and it ends the order. It ends the emergency order, and Governor Little loses his power. So anyhow, just give you a little bit of background of what we did. Had a bunch of us got together, and we sent the certified letters after we got multiple law firms to certify that our interpretation of the law was correct. So we sent it to every legislature, certified letter to every legislature in Idaho, and saying that June 23rd is the 90th day, so therefore by law you must convene. I think 15 of them showed up.
It was terrible.
Yeah, and it wasn't enough to have a quorum, so the emergency order continued. And why didn't they show up?
Follow the
Because,
money.
well, I'll tell you why. Because the governor's attorney, Wasden, the attorney general, he said that the legislature, who's of the legislative branch, right? He says they cannot convene without the governor's permission.
Oh,
That's what he said, and most of the legislatures believed him. So here we have, just boil this down, right? Here we have a provision in the Idaho law for if a governor tries to take executive powers, emergency powers indefinitely. If he tries to put us in a dictatorship, there's a provision, right? So the legislature can act to end the power of the executive. And then you've got the executive's attorney, so the governor's attorney, telling the legislature that they can't convene without the governor's permission. Right?
Give them an easy out.
What's that?
Give them an easy out.
Well, I don't know about you, but even in public school, in government, I learned about the 3 equal branches of government, checks and balances. and how one is supposed to check the other. And so now we have literally in Idaho where the lawyers are saying that the legislature, who's an equal branch to the executive branch of government, that the legislatures can't do what they need to do without the executive's permission.
So why doesn't a grassroots organization sue them for contempt?
Sue them? Well, that's a really good idea, but our Idaho Supreme Court suspended all jury trials. And they've suspended all jury trials, and it's been hit and miss, and even right now, jury trials are suspended in Idaho.
So what happens if you would have a trial coming up, would they hold you indefinitely?
That's exactly what's happening. We have an article, in the Sixth Amendment. Let's see here. We have a right, we're supposed to have a protected right to a speedy trial, right? Well, you don't get a speedy trial when they've suspended jury trials. I'll just leave it at that. And that's what's happened in Idaho. So now I'll continue here, because then they didn't convene, and we were, pretty upset about them not convening. And so we, informed them and communicated with them that we weren't very happy, and that it was their duty to convene. And they come back and said, well, we're going to have to do it in the 2021 legislative session. They said, and we're like, well, that's like 9 months. We're going to have to stay under these executive powers for 9 months? And they, yeah. Well, then, if you remember, a month later in August, the governor convened the legislature in a special legislative session. And what was that? Do you remember what he was trying to do there? He was trying to pass an immunity bill so that him and his buddies and any large corporation or hospital or anything, anybody who would inject let's say the COVID shot and someone died, it would make them legally immune to any of their action, any of their COVID actions. So you couldn't use the courts to sue them. That's what they tried to pass. They didn't get it done because we threw a big fit. I ended up getting arrested 6 times during that process. That's what it was. It was all over that.
Since the governor called the legislature back, why didn't they then take the control of our government back?
Because that's correct. That's correct. Because the lawyer said that you can only address what the governor says in the legislative session. So then we get to the 2021 legislative session. We're like, finally they're going to end the order, right? And they started to. The House started to pass a joint resolution or a resolution to end the order. And they get doing it, and the governor calls an emergency meeting with the House, gets them all together, and he says, look, if you pass this and you end the order, we won't get all these billions of dollars of federal funding. And we won't be able to, Idaho will be at a disadvantage, and all of these other things he says, right? And so the House dropped it. And still today now, almost 2 years later, we're still under emergency powers.
Didn't they specifically send somebody to tell him to kill it?
I don't know the exact details. I know that the governor, communicated with them that, they won't get all these federal funds, and they dropped it. So now, the legislature now is in session now. This is another year now. And they've been in session 4 times since he declared emergency status on Idaho. And we still are under these emergency powers. And so it puts us in a bad situation, yeah.
Okay, the latest order was January 7th, I believe.
That was a proclamation, just making sure everybody knew that we were still in emergency status. Yeah.
So does that obligate the legislature to convene 90 days later?
No, that's a proclamation. June 23rd is the day they were supposed to. But they could, right now, pass a joint resolution and end the order and free the people of Idaho for what the governor's doing, and they have refused. And they've done it because they sold the people of Idaho out. And, you know, I'm not very happy with the legislature. People ask me all the time, well, do you got allies with the legislature? Yeah, I do, but I'm not very happy with them. And I don't think the people of Idaho should be either. So anyway, let's talk about this, or I want to answer your questions, thoughts. We don't have to just talk about this. If you have some questions for me, I'll answer whatever I can as long as I can answer it. There.
What would you have done differently in March 2020?
I would have used the state's resources to get accurate information and then to disseminate that information to the people so they can make their own decisions. And I would have continued to be that source. So use the resources of the state to get the proper information, to have a way that the people can understand it, might do press conferences and all of that, inform the people of what's going on and the information they have accurately, and then allow the people to make their own decisions.
Yeah, but we're fighting the news media on that too.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I think it coming out of the office of the governor, you know, saying, hey, these are the facts, these are the things that and where people can rely on that, and then I'll make their own decisions. Business owners can make their own decision. People in their homes can make their own decisions. The churches can make their own decisions. If they decided they would shut down because they wanted to, it was within their power to do it, but there was no room for the government to come in and start arresting people. But so inform them, you know, inform the people of what was going on, and also, because, I mean, I'll just give you one example. I got you. So, for example, it was about 6 months ago that Governor Little was saying that 98.7% of the people in hospitals are unvaccinated. You remember that? Well, let me tell you how. Well, let me just show you. So, according to the CDC and Governor Little knew this, that in order to be declared vaccinated, you have to have both shots and 14 days had passed. Okay? So he's saying that 98.7% of the people in the hospital are unvaccinated. However, you could have the first shot, had an adverse reaction to it, go to the hospital because of that, and you're unvaccinated. You could have both shots, have an adverse reaction to it, or even die or whatever, and it's within 14 days, and you're still declared unvaccinated. And so he's telling the people of Idaho that all these hospitals are full of unvaccinated people, and then on the other hand, you're hearing, but they're all people, a whole bunch of the people are because they've taken this shot. Well, both are right. But the thing is the governor's using it as an element of deception. He's not informing the people that, yeah, this shot is damaging. It's dangerous.
The UK's
And the hospitals are clear full of people that have taken one or two of the shots. He's saying that they're unvaccinated. And why is he doing that? Well, he took a ton of federal money and he agreed to push the mandates because of that money.
Right.
All right. What other thoughts? What other questions? Right here.
Yeah, so you, on your flyer, you mentioned ending abortion when you come into the governorship. How do you see that as being different? I support that. I don't think abortion is right, but how do you support that in what we've just been talking about as a dictatorship? How is that different in executive power?
That's a great question. Because I plan on using, I'm not a fan of executive orders. But we also there's a couple things. One is, if I give, as a governor, give an executive order, what is that, who is that order to? to the executive branch of government. So if I'm the CEO of Walmart and I give an order and, you know, I write an executive order, does Target have to obey? So that's something that we have forgotten. And that's something that we need to understand better as a people. That the governor's orders are not supposed to go beyond the executive branch. But I just showed you how he believes it can. So when I say I'm going to give an executive order, I don't intend for it to go on beyond the executive branch. And what that executive order will be when it comes to abortion is that the resources of the executive branch, including declaring life at conception, will be to protect that life. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm a little unclear what you mean about who that goes to, executive portion. So you're saying it protects life, but yeah, I don't quite follow the last part of what you
So, let me also let me rephrase it. Let me say it a different way. Okay, so I'm going to completely say it a different way. We talked about freedom, right? I talked about camping in your backyard, or saying I'm going to live in your backyard because I think I have freedom and I can live wherever I want, right? So I go in your backyard, and you say I don't want you there, and I say I don't care, and you say, you know, you need to leave, and you begin, maybe we even have a physical confrontation, and I just won't leave. At that point, or even before, does the state have jurisdiction, have some jurisdiction to come in and correct the matter?
Yes.
It does, right? Why?
Trespass.
It's called criminal jurisdiction, okay? So that's when the state, that is the state's jurisdiction only, right? When there is an infringement upon rights, the state has the authority to act. Besides that, the state doesn't have authority to act. So all I will be doing with this executive order when it comes to is saying that the state has the duty to act to protect life at the beginning of conception. Because it's to protect the life, because an individual has a life and it is the state's duty to protect that at conception. That's what I will be doing, yes.
I've heard, and I don't know what the details are of this, but what is your take on us not paying income tax to the federal government, so we don't have to pay our taxes to pay for abortion and BLM and all these other things that none of us support, but yet they still spend our tax dollars on that?
Yeah, that's a real problem. So what's your question?
So are you planning on stopping that income tax for Idahoans, or
Well,
putting that into the works of some sort?
So, but in Idaho, like in the state of Idaho, yes. I'm also planning on eliminating property tax in Idaho. And what's the question that most people will ask me if I say I'm eliminating property tax or these other taxes? Yeah, how are you going to pay for the legitimate purposes of government?
They'll just tax you somewhere else.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I'm proposing. So he says, we'll just tax you somewhere else. So, but what is the problem with property tax?
They don't own it.
Yeah, you never own it. It's the property tax is the state deifying itself, saying it owns everything. And then you're just
Squatters.
yeah, you're just renting. You're just there, right? So again, remember we talked about property tax as a Marxist idea. It is the where the state takes control of all the property. It's very much familiar to what we got ourselves away from when we left Great Britain, right? There was a feudal system where the lords and the kings owned everything, and you had to pay them a fee or a tax in order to use the land. Well, also, again, Karl Marx says that the communism can be summed up in one sentence: the abolition of private property. So we need to get rid of that. We need to make it so that we actually own and control our own property. But then we have we have our sheriffs that we enjoy. We have some of our other services that we need. But so how do we pay for the legitimate purposes of the government? We like that we can record our deeds and so forth to the county recorder's office, and all those things cost money. So I want to go down through this with you. The average home in Idaho is right around $400,000, believe it or not. In the cities, it's $550,000 right now. And so let's take that $400,000 average home right there, and the average property tax per year would be $2,000 to $3,000. And over a 30-year period, that would tally to $60,000 to $90,000, right? But the problem with this is you just pay it until you die. And if you don't pay it, they take it. And people are losing their home every day in Idaho. Mostly the elderly or the disabled, or you lose your job for a while, you lose your home. So I want to replace it with a consumption tax. And I'm going to break this down for you. Let's take that first $400,000 home, or let's take that same $400,000 home, and let's just say 5%. It could be less than this, but 5% is easy math. And that would be due at the time of sale, or when it's sold, when you purchase it. Now you could just pay it, and then you'd be done with it, and you own your home. Or you could roll it into the mortgage and spread it out through the 30-year period of time if you want. And so that would be $20,000. Well, you might be saying, well, $20,000 is a far cry from the $60,000 to $90,000. But you have to take into consideration that average home sells in Idaho 3 to 5 times, which would bring revenue to the county or to the state over a 30-year period of $60,000 to $100,000. So that more than replaces the revenue for the state, for the local purposes. But the difference is that once the mortgage is paid off, or once it's paid off, you own your own home, and they can never take it. So there's only, we broke this down in many different ways. We know that there's going to have to be a period of time where people who already own their homes, who aren't going to be buying, there'll have to be a 5 to 7 year period of time where there's like this graduation period into this. We know that. But the only negative that we see to any of this is that if you put the $20,000 into a mortgage, you're going to have to pay interest on it. But that's well worth it to own your own home. At least to me, it'd be well worth it to own a home. So.
What about the people that already own their home?
Yeah, that's why I'm saying there's going to be a period of time between probably 5 to 7 years where we'd have to graduate into this, because you have to get the home selling. The average home that sells 3 to 5 times a year, you have to get them to bring revenue in, before you end the typical property tax. So for example, go ahead.
All right. We got our home 4 years ago. It's almost completely paid for. If it's valued now at $450,000, if this goes through, am I stuck with that $450,000 value, or are you going to put it back to what I originally paid for?
Yeah. Well, right now we see where our values are going crazy, and of course you can't. We know right now that the value is supposed to be there, but it's inflated. It's kind of and they're anticipating that Idaho will have a crash again, but. I'm proposing whatever the value is at that time of the sale. That's what the tax would be assessed off of. I don't know how you do it any other way. It'd be really complicated trying to do it any other way. But again, the benefit is that tax would be paid and you don't pay it anymore. The state no longer has interest in your home. Right here and then right here.
My question is on the property, if the property is paid off and something happens to the owners and you will it to your children, do they have to pay that tax in the transition to a new owner?
What do you think? Yeah,
That's an inheritance tax.
that'd be an
Isn't that
inheritance.
what, the administration is proposing? What protection do we have in Idaho for that?
So there is, it could go either way. You could say, okay, look, we're going to tax it once it transfers, or you just say if it was inherited, no, that could be something that would be a legislative, thing. I would like to see it not taxed when it transfers. I don't know how many homes, that we're talking about 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period. How many of those are being transferred through inheritance? I don't know. Because you have to make sure that, if we're going to continue to, use this for the legitimate purposes of government, have to make sure that those funds and transfers are happening so that the government, the legitimate purpose of government.
Different.
What's that?
Inheritance tax is different than having your property tax. And
Yeah.
that's in a whole different set of rules and regulations.
No, I know, but she was just saying that, would there be an exception to this transfer and the funds if it was transferred to the children, would then that these funds be due at that time? And to be honest with you, it could go both ways. Yeah. Oh, sorry about that.
Does the executive branch of government have the authority to implement this program?
No,
Okay, so you'd have to sell that to the legislature.
that's correct. That is correct.
Beat
Yeah.
the hell out of a reassessment and increase as.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that I would, need to go to the legislature, lead the legislature and get it done. That's absolutely right. Right here. Is that what you're gonna do? Okay. Right here.
I'm a transplant from California.
She's looking around like someone's gonna throw something at her.
Sorry, nobody's pulling a
Said that
gun.
out loud?
If I was a liberal, I'd still be there.
That's right.
Not there anymore. In California, though, my first husband was a contractor, and we lived in a small rural community in San Luis Obispo County. And one of the things that was implemented within that county, because it was growing immensely, people were escaping from Los Angeles and San Francisco and coming to San Luis Obispo County, which was in the center of the coastal part of the state. And what was implemented there, because, the people that had lived there their whole lives, they're paying their taxes according to Proposition 13. And then all of a sudden, you've got this enormous influx of people who are selling homes for a lot of money in both sides, both ends of California, and coming to San Luis Obispo County and buying a really nice home for less money. But what was implemented was a bedroom tax. So that when somebody applied to build a house, whether it was a general contractor building 50 homes or 1,000 homes, that bedroom tax had to be included in the cost of the permits. And then, of course, whoever bought the house ended up paying that extra tax. But
Was that only for somebody that was coming from out of that county?
no, it was anybody that was building houses and buying homes in that area. But it was a one-time charge against the building permit. So if the building permit started out, it was a $3,000 building permit, and then they implemented this bedroom tax. It's because some people were moving there with 5 kids, So they were building houses with 5 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms and 3 baths. And all of those kids were gonna be going to public schools. And they were gonna be putting a strain on the already existing public schools. So the bedroom tax was anywhere from $50 per bedroom to $125 per bedroom, and it depended on the location.
Thank you. I do not believe that anything, well, one is, I want you to understand that we need to downsize the expenses and the size of our government. We need to get it to where we are running much more efficient than we are. Now, when it comes to my proposal on property tax, or replacing property tax with a consumption tax, look what happens. When, let's say there's an area that's opened up for development in a community, and it opens up, or whatever it starts, and those lots are sold, or those properties are sold, immediately what comes to the state or to the county? This money up front. See, and then now they can use it to build roads, infrastructure, utilities and so forth. It's up front, rather than going in on a bond and trying to run it out for 30 to 50 years and paying interest on it. So kind of does the same thing. It makes it so that as homes are sold, property is developed, homes are built, that the money will come up front, and that way the county can use it up front to develop and build our roads and even our schools. I have some a lot of thoughts about public school, but anyway, that's one of another benefit with going with this consumption tax, because that money's up front. Yeah.
What are your views on education, and are you for choice, or the money follows the child wherever they go, instead of it going to just public schools, and then if parents want to send their kids to a private school, they gotta pay for it?
Yes. So I want to show you. I'm going to show you something here. So this is how well, let me show you 2 things. Let me go. So this right here is how basically the funds that the state gets in. So you see the general fund, about 43% of it. Dedicated funds, that'd be like your fuel taxes and so forth, about 20%. And then we rely on over 36% coming from the federal government. Okay? Which we know what that does. That all comes with strings. Okay? But just so you know, that's how it looks. And then this is how we spend it. So almost 40% on welfare, health and human services. And then we got almost 35% on education. And this is not including property tax. This is what the state spends. So property tax is another. So we're talking about about $6 billion a year on education and state education. And to be honest with you, we're not doing very good with it. It's a failure in most ways. And it's extremely, extremely expensive for the people of Idaho. So, how do we make it better? It's not going to go away anytime soon. How do we make it better? I believe we have to apply free market principles to our education system in order to make it go better. Yeah. And that would be twofold. There's two sides to, there's a customer, and then there's a business owner, if you will. There's 2 sides of free markets. There's a willing buyer and a willing seller. And so if we apply this to the schools, I think we might be able to, minimize dramatically the amount of money we spend and increase the actual education to our children through through a socialist program, basically. So
How we do that? First of all, we have to free our schools up, our administrators up, to be able to decide to teach how they want to teach, what they want to teach. Get rid of these federal curriculums, even get rid of a state curriculum. And so that our local administrators are deciding what they are going to teach. And then you allow the parents to decide where the money goes, what school, and so forth. And what you do is you create, you create a school system, and then you also you make it so that private schools, charter schools, now they can be popping up all over, and you create this competition rather than this monopoly that we have. However, you have to make sure that you don't create, or that you have to make sure that what's happening right now, actually, I'll back up. What's happening right now is we have like 10 hamburger shops in this little town, and they all have to go and, buy their hamburgers from the same place. They use the same, they have to get their, condiments the same. The buns have to be the same. They have to make them the same. They have to pay their employees the same. And that's, what kind of hamburger are you going to get under that circumstance? It's not going to be that great of a hamburger, right? That's the way our school system is right now. Right? It's like we're just making the same hamburger, and it's not that great of a hamburger. And it doesn't matter if you put school choice, where a parent gets to choose where the money goes. If you don't have a hamburger shop that's unique or different, they're all the same, what does it matter? You're just going to send your kid to the same hamburger shop. So you have to free up the local administrators and the school boards and all of that to be able to decide how they're going to teach. And then all of a sudden you have this possibility of this school focuses on this, and we really want our kids to go here, this school here, and you might have a private school, you might have a charter school, and you just use these public funds and in as much of a free market scenario as you can to actually create some good education. Also, if you get a school that's teaching critical race theory and the parents don't like that, who pays the price? Well, now we do, but the school would, right? At that, we're going to pull our kids out. Do you know right now, let's say there's a school that teaches critical race theory and you're unhappy with it, and let's say 50% of the parents pull their kids out of that school. And we believe that, oh man, that'll really teach them. That'll really teach them. They only, by Idaho statute, they can only receive a 3% decrease in budget the next year.
I thought it was based somehow on the number of students attending.
It's a 3% decrease. So let's say 200 students left, right? They have protected the schools where they only receive a 3% decrease in budget the next year.
So can they receive another 3% after that?
Yeah, then the next year, yeah.
It's like a protection so they don't just dump it all in.
Yeah, but what it creates that there's no accountability. They don't give a damn if the parents are leave or not.
We're starting to think about it, I think.
Well, I know like in Emmett where I was at a couple of years, when they were doing the whole, we went to the school boards and we complained and we did all of these things and they just didn't care.
Well, you're in a little stone town.
Okay, yeah. Well, maybe it was just because we were there, but there's very little accountability because it would take several years before they would ever get, before they'd actually ever get any financial accountability.
It happens here. I fought the school board. Took my kid out of school, but they didn't bat an eyelash. It was one person.
No, because we think, well, we'll pull them out of school and then they're not going to get the funds for, that student the next year, and that's not the way it is. So, yes.
What would it take to get the allocated money for a student that a school receives to go with the student wherever the parents choose for them to go to school? What would it take for that to happen?
It would take legislation. It would take legislation.
Would you support that? Would you support
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that the money follows the student and the parent decides where the student goes, right?
but it's a real accountability. When the parent takes that student out of that school no longer receives the funds that are dedicated to that student. And that parent can then take them and put them in this, and then that school would receive it.
Right.
And that way it puts the parents and back in charge, and then you free up the school boards and the local administrators to be able to teach. And now they're able to, specialize in something or create their own curriculum, or and really create a free market scenario within the schools. Yeah.
It's kind of, you mentioned the health and welfare system. How do you plan on regulating their corruptness with, coming into our schools and questioning our children without our permission,
And all the foreigners
or
that
coming
bring
into
in.
our house and threatening us that they're gonna take our children because we don't let them question them? Got any thoughts on that?
Well, the Health and Welfare Service, Department of Health and Welfare, believes they're the ones that issued, with the governor's executive orders, issued that health order. So they believe that they can actually force you to stay into your home. They're a massive, you can see they're the largest funded department of any other department in Idaho. And so they're massive. However, these departments right here, they all fall under the executive branch. And so one of the things that I've been very vocal about, I got you. One of the things I've been very vocal about is I could go into the office of the governor, spend 4 to 8 years, never legislate anything, just stripping the powers of the executive bureaucracies, stripping them down, minimizing them, even eliminating some of them, stripping their powers, their fundings and everything, pushing it back onto the legislature and back to the people. I could do that for 4 to 8 years, never legislate anything, and do the people of Idaho a tremendous amount of good. Tremendous amount of good, right? And one of the things that has to be done is this monster has to be tackled.
Yeah.
So there's something else that's going on, because these are the welfare services and so forth. And we're spending, almost $4 billion just last year in welfare services and so forth. And Idaho has increased its food stamps more than any other state in the United States. Governor Little has just dedicated $200 million of the CARES Act for government housing. We're seeing just this increased effort and money being put towards these welfare programs. Well, what kind of people is that going to attract to Idaho? What kind of people is that attracting to Idaho?
Dead weight.
Yeah,
Right?
parasites.
Yeah, it's those that don't want to work. So right here and right here.
That's my question, is how are you gonna reduce the people that are dependent on the income? To reduce that, cause everybody's become dependent on the food stamps and the free medical and free education. How are you gonna reduce that? And
Well,
slowly pull those away?
okay, so if you reduce it quite a bit dramatically, what will happen to those people?
They will hopefully get a job.
Either that or they'll move to Oregon. No, I'm not serious. I'm serious. I'm serious. They hunt for places that will give them the best welfare benefit. And where do we want them to go? We want to go to Oregon.
Washington and Oregon.
We want them to, not here. Yeah, right here.
Isn't it true that we have a lot of laws in Idaho that they're not even enforcing right now? And the executive branch can do executive orders to enforce those laws that would help Idaho.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not a fan of executive orders, but
You're not creating anything. A lot of times you could just put out an order to enforce the law that's already been on the books for years.
yeah.
That we've totally ignored.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Let me go back. I want to go back and touch on this. Touch on the because there's when people immigrate to a country or come to a state even, it doesn't matter. You can break them down to 3 different types of people. And one is they come for handouts, they come for because they're looking for something to, free or whatever. 2 is they're coming for criminal opportunity. And 3, they're coming because they want to be free. They want to work, they want a better place to live, they want to work for their living, they want to be good neighbors, they want to be part of the culture of where they're moving to. Now, who do we want in Idaho to come?
People that are coming to
The
work.
third, right? We want good neighbors that want to work for their living, and they want to, accept and enjoy the culture of the people that are there. And so, when you're talking about those that are coming for handouts, how do you stop them from coming?
Stop the handouts.
It's very simple, yeah.
With people that do exactly what you're talking about, the ones that just roam around looking for where they can get the biggest welfare check and the best free services. I am 74 years old, and I've been frustrated ever since 1963 when Johnson wrote in the Great Society, because that incentivized people to just sit home on their front porch and do nothing.
Right.
And I can't understand how come state and federal governments, because it is within the state that the rules decide who gets to collect welfare. If you have an able body, if you are young and strong and capable of having a job, God knows there is a help wanted sign in every business in Idaho right now, and it ought to be contingent. You do not get any social services. You don't get Medicaid, you don't get food stamps, you don't get a welfare check, and you don't get Section 8 housing unless you get a job, and that job doesn't pay 100% of your family's needs. And then you get a little money and a few
So,
foods.
I'm going to cut you off because I don't think we should be talking about, and I agree mostly with what you're saying, but I don't think we should be talking about how to make socialist programs better. Right?
But what I'm saying is that people that don't want to work, and God knows if they wanted to work, they wouldn't spend 30 or 40 years
I
on
agree with you.
welfare.
I agree with you.
If you tell them.
But if the
you're not-
programs are there, they're going to use them.
And if you tell them the
So-
only way that program is available to them is if they are gainfully employed and their check from their employment isn't enough.
And what I'm saying that if their check and employment isn't enough, then it's still not the state's responsibility to pay for it.
That's right.
And so that's what I'm saying. But I agree with you. I agree with you that they have to be working. We have to work. We're supposed to live by the sweat of our brow, not by the sweat of our neighbor's brow.
Right. And
So now, let me go back to, because we talked about how do you stop the first, people want handouts from coming in? You don't give handouts, right? And then what about those coming for criminal opportunity? Good examples like the cartel, right? They come over here and they prey upon people that are, and what? Yeah, honest and so forth. But also they prey upon people that their government won't protect. So, how do you stop that? Well, you have a very robust penal system, very robust justice system that is actually penalizing the individual that's preying upon has a victim. And
Rudy Giuliani.
I don't know, but possibly.
No, that's how he cleaned up New York.
Yeah, because you want what you want. It's like, don't come to Idaho because they don't give you anything. Don't come to Idaho because don't commit crime in Idaho because they'll make you pay back your damages to the victim. Like, don't come to Idaho. But yet, if you're of the mindset that you want to go and be a good neighbor, you want to work for your living, you want to, enjoy what Idaho has as far as its land, its cultures, and so forth, then you could go there to Idaho and do that. And what you see is you see the freeways full, heading to Oregon and Washington and California, of all these people that came for a handout. But what we are doing right now, and one of the reasons why we have to make decisions and make sure we make them the right decisions now, we are heading down a path where, it won't be very long, where we're like an Oregon or a Washington, because we are dumping so much into our welfare systems. We are pumping our streets clear full of programs and welfare, and we're seeing that right now, and it's already attracting all these people that are coming for the wrong reason. And Idaho just needs to be different. Why can't Idaho be the one where you don't have welfare? Why not? You could go to Oregon if you want to get on food stamps. You don't need to come to Idaho. Because welfare is not charity. Right? Welfare is not charity. Charity is when an individual willingly gives their funds to help their neighbor temporarily to get on their feet or whatever, right? And charity belongs to the individual. The churches can help. There is no room for the state to do it, because what happens? What is it called when the state gives welfare?
Robbery.
Well, robbery. That's a good word, but it's a redistribution of wealth. It's where they take money from somebody by force and give it to somebody else who's, in a program and so forth. And it's
Back to this allocation of funds that you had up there, and 30% or 35% of Idaho's budget comes from federal government. Is there any way to trim that off? Can we isolate a little bit more from what?
I'm going to make it really simple. Okay, so we got this 39.7, right? And let's go, then we go right here. And we replace it with this 36. Right? I mean, that's the type of stuff that we need to start thinking about. Like, we need to start saying, how can we be free from this federal control?
Yeah.
But, so that brings me into, and I've had you guys for quite a while, so thank you for your patience, but I think I could, if you'll bear with me, I'm gonna make one more point here, because this is a major problem. Every bit of this money comes with strings, memorandums of understanding, and they're holding the state of Idaho, for these fundings. And you have to say, well, why does Idaho depend on 36% of its budget to come from the federal government? Well, I'm going to tell you why.
All of the federal lands are in Idaho.
Because 61% of our land is being controlled by the federal government. And we cannot pay our own bills because the federal government has locked away our land and our resources. For example, Idaho has the largest cobalt deposit in the United States. Cobalt is a very valuable mineral. And right now, the federal government controls those deposits, and they lease it, and allow mining companies to come in from where? China, Australia, and Canada. And then they come and mine it, and they take it out and make a profit with it, and the people of Idaho make nothing on it. The federal government made the money, the mines made the money, they're foreign mines, and maybe there was a few jobs, right? Maybe there was a few jobs, and maybe that's the benefit. But it's very few jobs. Most of them they bring them from out of the state too. And so that's just one example. And so we will never be able to pay our own bills until we take back our land and resources. It's something we must do. Now back here.
Yeah, so I have a question about just what you were talking about, the private versus federal lands and privatizing that. How does that relate to hunting rights?
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that question, but I'm going to preface with a few other things, because there's some other things that are happening right now that are really important to understand when it comes to the federal control of our lands. So, you see here the white would be the private or state land, okay? Why is it white? Why is that white and that red? Anybody know?
Because red
The
is.
white is
dominant.
private, state, and the red is federally controlled, but why is it that way?
China?
Because this is what was developed first. The federal government came in later and claimed this red part. And why was the white developed first?
Better ground.
Because it's our agricultural land. It's the prime agricultural land. So, what are we doing now? What are we doing on that agricultural land?
Building houses?
That's right, we're building houses. Why? Because we're landlocked. We're destroying the #1 industry in Idaho, which is agriculture, by building on our agricultural land. You can't get that land back. I mean, there's only so much agricultural land, and anybody who farms knows you can't get that land back. And there's plenty of land that's around these cities and these towns to be able to grow in that are perfect for development. But the federal government won't allow it to happen. So we're destroying our #1 industry. Also, it's causing our affordable housing crisis right now. Because we're landlocked. We need more supply. We need to open it up. And then finally, and then I'm going to answer your question. Finally, what it's causing is our cities to become more densely populated. And when your cities become more densely populated, they become liberal. That's just what happens. There's reasons and statistics to why, people forget that, they think that milk is made by some machine in the back of Albertsons. And they don't understand that there's a connection to the land and the resources. And, when you plant a seed and it grows, you know that God lives. I mean, and when you lose that connection, even if you're just no longer mowing the grass, right? There's some connection to reality and conservatism that's connected to the land and the resources. So we're creating our own situation where I always like to call it like the Hunger Games situation, where you've got like the capital city, right? You got all the districts out there just feeding the capital city. And well, that's exactly what has happened in Oregon, Washington, California, Nevada, New Mexico, Colorado, right? That's what is happening, and it is. And you look at why has all of these conservative states, Oregon, Washington, were once conservative, very conservative states. Why did they turn, to this liberal type of, why did it turn that way? Well, but when you really boil it down, it's because the federal government in those states controls so much land and resources and has pushed so many people to the city, and then those cities become so densely populated that they control the rest of the state in their political, their political decisions. And a huge amount of it is this federally controlled problem that we have. Yeah.
Mr. Bundy, I'm sorry, Governor. I always say that the fish always thinks from the head down.
I know I'm still gonna answer your question. I haven't answered it. No, go ahead.
But yeah, the fish always thinks from the head down, right? So, all the shenanigans that go on, I married a wonderful Mormon woman that she should be here tonight. She should tell you what's going on in the school system and her family was political. And I sat here this morning, breakfast table, and just buried my head in stories she was telling me. You should talk to her. But what I want to say is, talking about federal lands and a lot of the other issues we talked about, we saw what happened to President Trump as he formed his, and I like to say the word cabinet, not administration, because that's just another word for dictatorship. What will you do as governor, to form your, it sounds like you're a good team builder, okay? Your experience you talked about is this stuff. What will you do to establish a good cabinet, a good solid team to combat the shenanigans that's been established here for years, every other state in the union. And a good liaison between the federal government and the state of Idaho. How do you have any
Okay.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, but I want to answer that. I think it's an excellent question, but I'm gonna finish answering this question real quick and then I'm gonna go back to it. But I do want to answer that question. So, we see the problems here with federal land control. We see what it's causing. It's just causing the affordable housing crisis. It's causing us to destroy our #1 industry growing on this. It's causing us to not be able to pay our own bills. And so then we ask the question, well, how do we take it back, and what do we do? What I'm proposing is that we take a large section of it, more of our more probably forested areas and the places we hunt, camp, fish, and hike on, and we designate that as multiple use land. And when I talk about multiple use land, we're talking about, a person hunting, fishing, hiking, camping, all of that, but also the loggers logging, miners mining, grazing, cattle grazing, all on the same area. That's the way the West was developed. I mean, most of our, hunting roads are what? Where did they come from? Logging, right? And so that's the way it was. That's when we come out, in the West, it's pretty arid. And so people would go out and they would use the resources, and people would hunt and hike and fish and camp and so forth. And that's what we call multiple use. And we're going to take this large area. So just so you know, we're talking about almost 33 million acres the federal government is controlling right now. Almost 33 million acres. So we're going to take a large amount of this land and we're going to designate it as multiple use land. And then we will make the lands that are around these cities and towns and so forth, make them available for disposal through some mechanism of disposal to the people's hands. Not to a large corporation, not to Bill Gates to come in and buying all the land up, but to make it available to the people of Idaho. And so that we can stop, to build on these hills and these areas where there are great places to develop, and stop building on our agricultural land. And so that's what I'm proposing. And people ask, well, how are we going to do it? Well, just so you know, there's generational loggers, there's generational mechanics, there's generational miners. Well, I come from a generation of people of fighting this very, very battle. I'm the third generation of fighting this very battle just to survive in the Nevada desert. It's something that we've researched and have worked on with my family for generations. And the solution is very simple, actually. Because if you take a county, right, let's say this county here, and it's broken up into parcels, right? If you look on a county map, you go to the county recorder's office, it's broken up into parcels. And you can look and say, oh, this parcel belongs to this person. Well, if you go to, that's a parcel of this red land, this red area here, who does it say it belongs to? They might say like BLM or something like that, right? Well, go down to the county recorder's office and ask them for a title. What's the county recorder going to tell you? There is no title. It's unappropriated land. Unappropriated. It's never been appropriated. And the state and the county has the power to appropriate, and we will use that power and appropriate this land.
That was my next question. What will the feds do if you do that? I'm sure you.
Oh, it's going to be a battle.
Oh.
It's going to be a battle. But guess what? It's not a battle of a little family in the desert trying to fight the federal government. It's the state of Idaho fighting it. And that's the way it should be. So yeah, it's going to be a battle. But constitutionally, that is our land. They have no right to take and do what they've done. And we cannot even be a state as a state should be. Pay our own bills. If we don't take it back, it's a battle that we have to fight. So, and I plan on fighting that battle. So, right here, if it's related, then I'm going to go answer your question.
Well, if it's not, it's kind of certain.
Okay, let me answer his question and then I'll go back to you.
So, and then we'll get you out of here. I appreciate your patience. All right, so he asked the question, well, you know, because President Trump went into a den of snakes, you know, a pit of snakes, and he just fought them the whole time. He couldn't, you know, he definitely did some good things. I mean, he got a lot of things done, right? And that's certainly going to happen, you know, But one thing that there is some difference in a state as on a federal level. And, you know, I'll have to find my allies. I'm going to have to find, you know, in the legislature and so forth. But one thing that's going to happen is the people are going to have to back me. They're going to have to back me. And with leadership at the top, meaning, you know, I don't even want to say at the top, but from the governor's office, with, you know, proposed legislation, proposed, you know, actions, and then the people's support from the bottom, if you will, then I think that we can get a lot of this stuff done. Plus, I mean, that's all I've learned. That's what I've become accustomed of. That's what I do. I battle. That's what I've done. My family, you know, fought the federal government in multiple major federal cases and have won. And we have done some things, and I'm not taking full credit because I know it was the Lord that guided and directed us. But we were able to, like in the cases that we've had, the federal government spent $100 million trying to prosecute my family. $100 million. It's a lot of money. And yeah, that's a lot of your money. That's a lot of your money. And we beat them both. We beat them twice, not just once, twice, in their own courts, in their own systems. And so, you know, I am accustomed to fighting, accustomed to battle.
I mean, talking about the federal lands of, I think, if you could find, or we as people could find a good federal liaison between the state of Idaho that talks the language, knows how to play the game, you know, is on your team, like should have been on Trump's team. That would be really important in this stuff.
I think so, but I could promise you, getting these lands back into the control of the people of Idaho and the state is not going to happen because the federal government allows it to happen. Yeah. Yeah. So, all right. Oh, you had a question right here.
I did, and maybe it was addressed and I didn't catch it, but you were talking about the educational system and the money following the children. I didn't hear any mention of homeschooling in there. And that to me is every bit as important, well, not more so, because I had 6 kids and I homeschooled all of them. I didn't take a penny from the government or anything. I had to buy my own curriculum and supplies, and I still had to pay taxes to the Parma school system. So it would have been so much easier if there'd have been some way for some of that money to be directed where I could use it. At the time, I was told that they were getting $7,000 per kid in the system.
Right.
This has been a long time ago. I could have done so many things to enrich my children's education instead of more bare bones if that had been available. So would you do something for the homeschool community?
Yeah, however, I will say, yes, absolutely. However, most homeschool, you know, families or parents that have homeschooled, they just simply do not want the state involved in their education at all. And as soon as they don't want to opt in or opt out. They just want to be left alone. That's right. They would rather bear the cost and all of that. And protecting that right is very important. Protecting the right for a parent to decide that we're going to educate our children the way we want to is important. Now, if someone wants to opt in or wants to, you know, to be part of these funds that are dedicated to the student, that's something that probably will be made available. But we have to make sure that we protect the right of the parent to say, look, we don't want any involvement in the state's, you know, state funds or state, you know, because as soon as they start taking funds, then the state will want to make sure that those funds are being accounted for, that they're not just being wasted and so forth. And that means that they're gonna in some way be involved in the, what's going on in the, and many parents just don't want that. And I agree, because who has the right to educate and the duty to educate children? That's right. So even if we go and sub that to a public school or a private school, it's still the parents' responsibility to make sure that their children are educated. And some parents just simply do not want the state's involvement at all, and we need to protect that right. So, all right, right here and then right here, and then right here, because we gotta wrap up here. I appreciate it. Right here.
Me?
Real quick,
No, you're second.
so clarification, I thought like you were gonna basically get rid of all state, like, educational departments, let us decide, kind of free market, you know, give us our money back instead of taxing us, right? And it was just federal money you were talking about?
Well, in the perfect world, yes. In the perfect world, and I have talked about diminishing the size of public education by 80% in 8 years. But it's going to be a process, because you have to, the free market has to get going where you have these, private schools, where the public schools start functioning more like a private school, in the sense where they might, where they are accountable to the funds that they get. And yeah, in a perfect world, that's exactly what we would do. But in the reality, we have to go through this process while we're getting it and allowing the free market principles to start to apply.
It's the
So,
same way with the welfare, I mean, give us back our money, you'd be
yeah,
so
I won't be so, yeah, exactly. But I can promise you, I won't be so patient with the welfare systems. Right here and then right here.
Well, one of the things that has always offended me about taking government funds for public education is that it always has strings attached, and those strings that are attached are regarding the curriculum. The federal government wants to control the brainwashing of your children, and if you don't include certain things in your public school curriculum, then they don't give you the money. And then you've got the teachers' unions that are saying, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We want that money. So they're willing to kowtow and bring in things to the public education curriculum that none of us wants our children to be involved with.
And that's why we were talking about how you have to free the school boards, the administrators. You have to free them up so that they can start making those decisions themselves. And it doesn't work without freeing them up. Otherwise, you end up with that hamburger that's the same as all the other hamburgers, right? All right, right here.
I just have this one question. Would you be willing to promise all your voters that you would be 100% committed to the majority of the Republican Party's venues? The Republican Party does not need another rhino.
Amen.
So when you say, did you say venue? Republican Party, the platform?
Platform.
Okay. Well, the Republican Party platform is a righteous platform. It is a good platform. But you have to ask the question, what is in the Republican Party platform? Elimination of, abortion, the lower taxes, the lower size of government, increase, getting government out of businesses, freeing the people up with a all, Republican dominated House, Republican dominated Senate, and they've controlled the governor's office for almost 40 years now. Why haven't those things been done in Idaho? Like, why haven't they been done in Idaho?
Follow the money.
Well, yeah, we have. So when you go down through this, where we're at, and we're talking about, like, we're headed down towards Oregon, right? Idaho is becoming an Oregon, right? That's what's happening. And you look at what happened to Oregon and Washington and the others, and they went from conservative, ultra conservative, to Republican, or to conservative and then Republican. Or Republican and conservative is not the same thing. We make sure that we understand it, right? And then they went to this perverted version of Republicanism. And then they went to Democrat, liberal, and so on and so forth, right? Until that's where they're at now. Well, where are we at right now in Idaho? We're in the perverted version of Republicanism right now, where they don't set forth the Republican platform. They're basically Republican in name only. And where they believe in big government, they believe in large taxes, they believe in big welfare programs, and that's what we were seeing. And so as far as, setting forth the Republican platform, yeah, because that's what I believe is right. That's what I believe is right. That's what I intend on doing. So I just want to wrap up here and say that I believe that Idaho must be different. I believe Idaho must be different. I believe Idaho must become a refuge from the outside world. Where Idaho must be a place where people who love God, who want to worship Him, who want to freely trade with each other, who want to travel and move about, who want to be able to make their decisions themselves, who want to be able to control their body, where that they can come here and be protected in that. And I believe that that is what Idaho must become. And I believe that it is desperately needed. I believe if we do that, and if we free people and we allow them to do the things that they have a right to do, that we will see an economic prosperity in this state that's similar to the early states of when we first formed this country. Because we will be applying the same principles, and so the same action will happen. And we will be an ensign or an example to the rest of the world of how applying freedom and being free brings prosperity, brings peace, brings public tranquility and happiness. And maybe freedom and prosperity and liberty will begin to spread once again across the United States and across North America and even over into other continents, simply because of what we do here in Idaho. And so I appreciate your time. I'm grateful for you giving me the time to explain these things. So thank you.